The water's rippling surface in the backyard, Jacuzzi caught the afternoon sunlight, creating hypnotic patterns that matched Monique Cross's scattered thoughts. Her fingers absently traced the rim of her coffee mug as she stared through the kitchen window, not really seeing the meticulously landscaped yard that had once been her pride. Something was wrong with her marriage. After 15 years together, she'd developed a sixth sense about Bradley. The subtle shifts in his behavior, the almost imperceptible changes in his routines. They were like variations in a chemical reaction she'd run 1,000 times, tiny anomalies that signaled something fundamental had changed. Monique tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear and checked her watch. 5:15. She should have been at the lab 30 minutes ago. As the lead chemist on a groundbreaking pharmaceutical project, her presence was crucial, especially now that they were entering the final testing phase. But this morning, she'd lingered at home, making excuses to herself about forgotten papers and emails she needed to send. The truth was simpler and more painful. She wanted to catch Bradley in whatever lie he was living. Her cell phone vibrated on the counter. Bradley. "Hey," she answered, keeping her voice neutral despite the knot tightening in her stomach. "Monique, are you still home?" His voice carried that new edge of impatience that had become common over the past few months. "Just heading out. Had to finish some reports." "Well, I wanted to remind you about that late meeting tonight, the one with the Singapore team. You mentioned it yesterday." Monique frowned. She hadn't mentioned any late meeting. "Right. Thanks for the reminder. These international calls are so important for your career advancement," Bradley continued, his tone shifting to what she now recognized as manufactured enthusiasm. "You should definitely stay as long as they need you. Don't worry about rushing home." The knot in her stomach twisted harder. "That's thoughtful of you. You know I support your career 100%. There was muffled speaking in the background before Bradley added, "Got to run. Big presentation in 5. Love you." The call ended before she could respond. Monique set her phone down and stared at it. Since when did Bradley care so much about her career advancement? For years, he'd made subtle comments about how her hours at the lab took her away from home too much. Now, suddenly, he was encouraging her to work late, even fabricating meetings she hadn't mentioned. She walked to the back door and stepped onto the patio, drawn to the jacuzzi that sat on a raised wooden platform. Bradley had insisted on installing it 3 months ago, an unexpected suggestion since he'd always claimed hot tubs were bacteria factories. At the time, she'd been touched by what seemed like a romantic gesture. "Something to help you relax after those long days at the lab," he'd said, hugging her from behind as they watched the installation team position the large tub. Now, Monique wondered if the motivation had been entirely different. She approached the jacuzzi and lifted the heavy cover, noting that it had been properly secured, something Bradley rarely bothered to do when he used it. The water was perfectly clear, the chemical balance likely impeccable. Another anomaly. Her husband, for all his executive polish, had never been meticulous about household maintenance. Monique lowered the cover and turned toward the house. That's when she noticed the security camera mounted under the eaves, the one that covered the back patio and jacuzzi area, was tilted at an odd angle, now pointing uselessly at the fence instead of the patio. She approached it, standing on tiptoe to examine the mount. It had been deliberately repositioned. A cold certainty settled in her chest as pieces clicked into place. Bradley's sudden interest in her working late, his unexpected enthusiasm for a jacuzzi he'd previously disdained, and now a security camera that had been deliberately misaligned. Her phone vibrated again, a text from Dr. Preston Jensen, the CEO of the pharmaceutical company where she worked. "Meeting in 20 minutes. Your presentation on the stability tests?" Reality crashed back. Whatever was happening in her marriage, she still had responsibilities, professional obligations that wouldn't wait for her personal crisis. 40 minutes later, Monique stood in the pristine lab at Nexus Pharmaceuticals, trying to focus on the molecular model displayed on her computer screen. The compound they were developing could revolutionize treatments for autoimmune disorders, potentially helping millions of patients. Usually, this work absorbed her completely. Today, her mind kept drifting to that jacuzzi and the deliberately misaimed security camera. "You're distracted," observed Dr. Jensen, appearing beside her workstation. At 58, Preston Jensen was both brilliant and perceptive, with silver-streaked hair and keen eyes that missed nothing. "That's unlike you, Monique." She straightened her lab coat. "Just a lot on my mind. The stability tests are promising, though. The compound maintained 98% integrity even after accelerated aging simulations." Jensen nodded, but didn't move away. "That's excellent news, but it doesn't explain why you've been staring at the same molecular structure for 15 minutes without typing a single note." Monique sighed. She'd worked with Preston for nearly a decade. He'd been her mentor when she'd first joined Nexus, and over the years, their professional relationship had evolved into a mutual respect that sometimes bordered on friendship. "Personal matters," she admitted. "Nothing that will impact the project, I promise." He studied her face for a moment. "Take the afternoon. Clear your head. The Singapore team can wait until tomorrow." "The Singapore team?" Monique echoed, her pulse quickening. "Yes. Weren't you planning to join that call next week? Bradley mentioned it when we spoke at the charity gala last weekend." A chill ran through her. Bradley had been laying groundwork, creating a fictional late meeting that would give him hours of uninterrupted time at home. But why tell her boss about it? "Right, next week," she corrected smoothly. "Must have mixed up my dates." Jensen patted her shoulder. "It happens to the best of us. Go home, Monique. Whatever's bothering you, deal with it. I need your full focus when you return." As she gathered her things, Monique's scientist mind was already analyzing, hypothesizing, planning. She needed evidence, not suspicions, and she knew exactly how to get it. Instead of heading home, Monique drove to an electronics store in a shopping center across town. She purchased a new security camera, one small enough to be inconspicuous, but sophisticated enough to capture high-definition video with motion activation. She also bought a portable monitor that could receive the camera's signal. By 5:30, she was parked on a side street 2 blocks from her home, the monitor positioned on her dashboard. The new camera, carefully hidden in a decorative planter on the patio, had a perfect view of the jacuzzi. Now, all she had to do was wait. At 6:15, a sleek silver Audi pulled into her driveway. Bradley's car. He exited quickly, his tall figure cutting a sharp silhouette in his tailored suit. He glanced around, a furtive gesture that made Monique's heart sink, before entering the house through the front door. 20 minutes later, a red BMW convertible approached. Monique recognized it immediately. Tiffany Brennan, Bradley's recently promoted marketing specialist. The woman was 15 years younger than Monique, with platinum blonde hair and the kind of figure that came from daily personal training sessions. She parked on the street rather than in the driveway, another telling detail, and made her way to the front door, carrying what appeared to be a bottle of champagne. Monique's hands tightened on the steering wheel as she watched the woman enter her home without knocking. The casual familiarity of it was like a physical blow. This wasn't their first encounter in her house. This was a routine. The monitor on her dashboard came to life as motion triggered the hidden camera. Bradley and Tiffany appeared on the patio, laughing intimately as Bradley carried 2 champagne flutes while Tiffany balanced the bottle and a small platter of what looked like cheese and crackers. "I thought your wife had that big Singapore meeting tonight," Tiffany said, her voice clear through the camera's audio pickup. "She does," Bradley replied, setting down the glasses on the patio table. "Won't be home until at least 11, probably later." He moved behind Tiffany, wrapping his arms around her waist and kissing her neck. "We have the whole place to ourselves." Tiffany turned in his arms, a coy smile playing on her glossy lips. "And you're sure the promotion announcement is happening on Monday?" Preston confirmed it. "It's done," Bradley assured her, stroking her hair. "Jensen trusts my judgment implicitly. I told him you were the only logical choice to head the new digital marketing division. Even though my quarterly numbers were the lowest on the team? Tiffany giggled. Bradley kissed her. Numbers aren't everything. I explained to Preston that your strategic vision was what mattered. He stepped back and gestured toward the jacuzzi. Should we celebrate your imminent promotion? Monique watched in stunned silence as the pair prepared for their soak. The casual way they moved through her space, Bradley opening the cabinet where towels were stored, Tiffany adjusting the water temperature as if she'd done it a dozen times before, told her this was far from their first rendezvous. As they slipped into the jacuzzi with their champagne, Monique turned off the monitor. She'd seen enough. More than enough. The scientist in her had wanted empirical evidence, and now she had it. The woman in her wished she could unsee it all. She started her car and drove, not toward home where she would have to confront the destruction of her marriage, but toward the only person who might understand, her sister-in-law, Carmen Hendricks. Despite being Bradley's sister, Carmen had always maintained a separate relationship with Monique. They'd become close over the years, bonding over their shared exasperation with Bradley's ego and their mutual love for Carmen's daughter, Allison. 20 minutes later, Monique was sitting at Carmen's kitchen table, a mug of tea growing cold between her hands as she recounted what she'd discovered. "That absolute bastard," Carmen muttered, pacing the kitchen. "Using your house? With that 28-year-old Barbie doll?" She stopped and faced Monique. "And he's manipulating Preston to get her promoted?" Monique nodded, feeling oddly detached. The scientist in her had taken over, compartmentalizing emotions to focus on facts. "The evidence is conclusive." Carmen sat down heavily across from her. "What are you going to do? Confront them?" "Not yet." Monique took a sip of her lukewarm tea. "A direct confrontation now would be inefficient." "Inefficient?" Carmen raised an eyebrow. "He would deny, minimize, gaslight. Standard patterns in these situations." Monique set her mug down with careful precision. "I need a more definitive response." From the living room came the sound of animated voices and cheerful music. Allison was watching cartoons. "You can stay here tonight," Carmen offered. "I'll make up the guest room." Monique shook her head. "I need to go back to the lab. There's something I need to work on." Carmen studied her with concern. "You're scarily calm. You know that?" "I'm a scientist," Monique replied. "We observe, analyze, and then act. Emotions cloud judgment." A small voice interrupted them. "Auntie Monique!" 4-year-old Allison bounced into the kitchen, her dark curls framing an excited face. "You missed the best part. The mean wizard turned everybody blue." Monique managed a smile for her niece. "Blue people? That sounds silly." "They were so blue," Allison giggled. "All over, even their hair." She climbed onto Monique's lap. "Can people really turn blue, Auntie? Since you're a scientist and know everything?" Monique was about to explain that no, people didn't turn blue outside of cartoons, when a thought struck her. So perfect, so fitting, that she almost laughed out loud. "Actually, Allison," she said, hugging her niece while a plan began crystallizing in her mind, "under certain circumstances, people can indeed turn very blue. It's all about having the right chemical reaction." Carmen caught her eye across the table, recognizing something in Monique's tone. "Allison, why don't you go finish your show? Auntie Monique and I need to talk about grown-up things." Once the child had skipped back to the living room, Carmen leaned forward. "What are you thinking?" For the first time since discovering Bradley's betrayal, Monique smiled, a small, determined curve of her lips that held no warmth. "I'm thinking about chemistry, Carmen, and justice, and the remarkable properties of certain compounds when activated by specific environmental conditions." She stood up, suddenly energized. "I have to get to the lab. There's something I need to develop." "Monique?" Carmen's voice held both warning and curiosity. "What exactly are you planning?" Monique gathered her purse and keys. A chemical reaction that Bradley and his little promotion seeker won't forget. She headed for the door, then paused. "By the way, what cartoon was Allison watching?" The one with the blue people? Some kids' show about little blue creatures living in mushroom houses. Why? Just curious, Monique replied, though the glint in her eye suggested much more than mere curiosity. Very curious indeed. As she drove toward the Nexus Pharmaceuticals laboratory, Monique's mind was already racing through formulations, calculations, and reaction sequences. Bradley had always underestimated her intelligence, her determination, and her creativity. He was about to discover just how grave a miscalculation that had been. In the sterile confines of her private lab, with equipment worth millions of dollars at her fingertips, Monique was going to create something special, something that would ensure Bradley and Tiffany's next Jacuzzi celebration would be memorable for all the wrong reasons. And it would happen just in time for that important Monday meeting where Tiffany's undeserved promotion was to be announced. After all, as any chemist knew, timing was everything in a perfect reaction. The Nexus Pharmaceuticals building stood silent and nearly empty at 9 o'clock that Friday evening. The security guard nodded at Monique as she swiped her access card at the laboratory entrance. "Working late again, Dr. Cross?" "Critical development phase," she replied with a professional smile. "Science doesn't sleep. Neither do you scientists, apparently." He chuckled, returning to his crossword puzzle. Inside her private lab, Monique locked the door and pulled the blinds. What she was about to do wasn't exactly within company protocols, though nothing she planned was dangerous or illegal, just creative. She powered up her workstation and began reviewing the properties of various compounds. As a specialist in molecular stabilization and delivery systems, she had intimate knowledge of how substances interacted with human tissue. Her team had recently been developing transdermal medication patches that could release controlled doses through skin contact. The technology was revolutionary and perfectly adaptable for her current purposes. Monique pulled several components from the storage cabinets and began measuring precise amounts. The formula taking shape in her mind was elegant in its simplicity. A two-phase compound that would first produce a temporary blue coloration on contact with warm water and skin, then gradually transition to a longer-lasting effect as it bonded with proteins in hair follicles. For the next 3 hours, she worked with meticulous precision, testing small samples on patches of synthetic skin. The initial results were promising, but not quite what she wanted. The blue was too purple-tinted, the activation time too slow. "Perfect is the enemy of good enough," she muttered to herself, a phrase that Preston Jensen often repeated. But tonight, perfect was exactly what she needed. By midnight, she had refined the formula to her satisfaction. The resulting liquid was completely clear, indistinguishable from water, but would activate with heat to produce a vivid cerulean blue stain on skin that would be extremely difficult to wash off immediately. More importantly, any hair that came in contact with the solution would absorb the compound deep into the follicles, creating a semi-permanent blue tint that conventional hair treatments couldn't remove. Monique carefully filled a small container with her creation, labeled it Experimental Compound MC45, and secured it in her personal lockbox. As she gathered her things to leave, her phone vibrated with a text message from Bradley. "Hope the Singapore meeting is going well. Don't rush home. Taking a sleeping pill and turning in early. Important presentation prep tomorrow." She stared at the message, a cold anger settling in her chest. He was so confident in his deception that he wasn't even trying to be subtle anymore. Tomorrow was Saturday. Bradley rarely worked weekends unless it was something exceptionally important, like ensuring his mistress received a promotion she didn't deserve. Monique didn't respond to the text. Instead, she opened the security camera app on her phone. The feed showed her empty patio. Bradley and Tiffany had finished their Jacuzzi rendezvous and moved elsewhere in the house, likely to the master bedroom, her bedroom. 15 minutes later, Monique parked her car on the same side street she'd used for surveillance earlier. The house appeared dark from the outside, but she knew better than to approach the front door. Instead, she circled around to the garden gate that led to the backyard using her key to enter silently. The patio was illuminated only by the soft landscaping lights that automatically activated at sunset. The jacuzzi sat undisturbed, its cover secured. Monique moved quietly, retrieving her hidden camera from the planter before approaching the hot tub. She lifted the cover just enough to access the water, then carefully added her specially formulated compound, stirring it gently until it completely dissolved. The water remained perfectly clear, exactly as intended. As she secured the cover again, Monique noticed something on the patio table: 2 empty champagne flutes and the bottle, carelessly left behind. Next to them was a woman's bracelet, a flashy thing with diamonds that caught the low light. Tiffany had apparently forgotten it in her haste. Monique picked up the bracelet, examining it briefly before slipping it into her pocket. Evidence. Not that she needed more, but it might prove useful. She crept around to the side of the house, staying away from the windows, and returned to her car. Only then did she allow herself to respond to Bradley's text. Meeting running late. Might just crash at Carmen's after. See you tomorrow. His reply came almost immediately. Good idea. Get some rest. Love you. The casual love you, after everything she'd witnessed today, struck her as especially cruel. 15 years of marriage reduced to a perfunctory platitude while he lay in their bed with another woman. Monique drove back to Carmen's house, where the guest room was already prepared. Her sister-in-law didn't ask questions when she arrived just after 1 in the morning, just handed her a glass of wine, and sat with her in silent solidarity until they both went to bed. Sleep eluded Monique as her mind replayed the day's events and anticipated what would come next. The scientist in her had calculated and measured precisely. Now all that remained was to observe the reaction. Saturday morning arrived with the cheerful chaos that accompanied life with a 4-year-old. Allison bounced into the guest room at 7:30, launching herself onto the bed, where Monique had barely managed a few hours of restless sleep. "Auntie Monique! Mommy's making pancakes. The blueberry kind you like." Monique managed a smile, pulling herself upright. "That sounds perfect, sweetheart. And guess what? We're going to watch more Blue People cartoons. Want to watch with me?" Allison's enthusiasm was contagious. "I'd love to," Monique replied, genuinely touched by her niece's eagerness to include her. Over breakfast, Carmen studied her carefully. "You look like you've been through war," she said, when Allison was distracted by the family dog. "Did you sleep at all?" "A little." Monique sipped her coffee. "I should go home soon." "Are you sure? You can stay here as long as you need." Monique shook her head. "I need to see this through. Today is just preparation. The main event is Monday." Carmen's eyes narrowed. "Do I want to know?" "Plausible deniability might be best," Monique replied with a ghost of a smile. "But I promise it's nothing that would harm anyone physically. Emotionally and professionally, though? Fair game? Let's just say there will be consequences proportionate to the offense." After breakfast, Monique sat with Allison to watch cartoons as promised. The Blue People turned out to be a children's show about tiny creatures living in a forest. Allison was entranced by their adventures, especially when they had to hide from a mean wizard who wanted to capture them. "Blue is my favorite color now," Allison announced, clutching her stuffed bunny. "I'm going to ask for blue everything for my birthday." "Blue is a wonderful color," Monique agreed, her mind drifting to Monday's impending events. By early afternoon, Monique had gathered her things and prepared to return home. She hugged Carmen tightly at the door. "Call me if you need anything," Carmen insisted. "Anything at all." "I will. Thank you for being here for me." "Always," Carmen replied firmly. "And Monique, whatever you've planned, make it count." "Oh, it will," Monique promised. Some reactions, once started, can't be stopped. When Monique arrived home, Bradley's car was gone from the driveway. She found a note on the kitchen counter. "At the office, preparing for Monday's presentation. Back for dinner. There's a surprise for you in the fridge. Love, B." The surprise turned out to be a small cake from her favorite bakery, with "Congratulations on the Singapore deal" written in elegant script. The calculated manipulation of it, using a celebration of her fictional late meeting as cover for his affair, made her stomach turn. Monique spent the afternoon methodically gathering evidence. She downloaded the security footage from her hidden camera, backing it up to multiple secure locations. She photographed Tiffany's forgotten bracelet and placed it in an envelope along with a printout of Bradley's text about taking a sleeping pill and turning in early. Finally, she tested the jacuzzi water, confirming that her compound was perfectly dissolved and ready to activate with heat. Around 6 o'clock, Bradley returned home carrying takeout from an expensive Italian restaurant, another calculated gesture of false thoughtfulness. "There's my brilliant wife," he greeted her with a kiss on the cheek. "How did the Singapore call go?" "Productive," Monique replied vaguely. They had some interesting perspectives. "I got your favorite," he said, unpacking containers of pasta. "Figured you deserved a treat after working so late." They ate dinner with the practiced rhythm of a long-married couple, discussing neutral topics like an upcoming neighborhood event and a movie they'd been planning to see. Bradley mentioned his presentation preparations in carefully vague terms, claiming it was for a major client pitch. Not once did he betray any sign of guilt or discomfort. His performance was flawless and all the more damning for it. After dinner, Bradley suggested they watch a movie. "Something to help us both unwind," he said, settling on the couch beside her. Monique agreed, though her mind was elsewhere, calculating and recalculating the coming day's events. Halfway through the film, her phone chimed with a message from Carmen. "Everything okay? Call if you need an escape." Bradley glanced over. "Carmen checking up on you?" "Just confirming plans for next weekend," Monique lied smoothly. "Allison's birthday planning committee." He nodded absently, returning his attention to the movie. Monique texted back, "All proceeding as expected. We'll update you Monday." Sunday passed in a similar fashion. A surreal performance of normal married life while Monique finalized her plans. Bradley spent several hours on his laptop, allegedly working on his presentation. Monique noticed how he angled the screen away from her view and took calls in his home office with the door closed. Behaviors that would have seemed innocuous before, but now screamed of deception. That evening, Bradley announced he would need to leave early Monday morning for pre-meeting preparations with his team. "The executive committee is making some big decisions tomorrow," he explained over dinner. "Career-defining moves for some people." "How exciting," Monique replied, maintaining her composure. "Anyone I know?" Bradley hesitated just a fraction too long. "Mostly people from marketing. No one you'd know well." "Well, I hope the best candidate gets the position," she said, watching his reaction carefully. "Of course," he agreed, though something flickered behind his eyes. "Merit always wins out in the end." Later that night, as they prepared for bed, Bradley casually mentioned the jacuzzi. "You should use it more often, you know," he said, as he changed into pajamas. "It really helps with stress." "I was thinking of using it tonight, actually." Monique's pulse quickened. "I thought you were concerned about bacteria." "Changed my mind after trying it a few times," he said with a shrug. "The chemicals keep it clean enough." "It's all about the right chemical balance," Monique agreed, fighting to keep her expression neutral. "But you should probably skip it tonight. You need your rest for tomorrow's big presentation." Bradley seemed momentarily disappointed, but nodded. "You're right. Better to turn in early." As Monique lay beside her husband that night, listening to his steady breathing, she felt strangely calm. Tomorrow would bring chaos for Bradley and Tiffany, but for Monique it would bring clarity and justice. Before falling asleep, she checked her phone one last time. There was a message from Preston Jensen. "Need you in early tomorrow. 8 a.m. Executive Committee meeting. Your input required on Bradley's promotion recommendations." Monique smiled in the darkness. Perfect timing. The final piece of her plan had fallen into place, without her even having to arrange it. "Sometimes," she whispered to herself, The universe provides exactly the catalyst you need. Monday morning arrived crisp and clear. Bradley was up before dawn, showering and dressing with unusual care, selecting his most expensive suit and power tie. Monique watched through half-closed eyes as he checked his appearance multiple times in the mirror, adjusting his collar and smoothing his hair with nervous precision. "Big day?" she murmured, pretending to have just woken up. "The biggest," he replied, not elaborating. "I might be late tonight. Don't wait up." After he left, Monique rose and prepared with equal care, selecting a tailored burgundy dress that projected confidence and authority. As she applied her makeup, she allowed herself a moment of reflection. By the day's end, everything would change. Her marriage, Bradley's career, Tiffany's ambitions, all transformed by a cascade of consequences set in motion by their own choices. And it would all begin with a very special executive committee meeting at 8 o'clock. Nexus Pharmaceuticals occupied the top 10 floors of a gleaming glass tower in the heart of the financial district. Monique arrived at 7:30, giving herself time to prepare mentally for the morning's events. The executive suite on the 30th floor was already buzzing with activity, as assistants arranged presentation materials and catering staff set up coffee and breakfast pastries for the committee meeting. Monique greeted the receptionist with practiced calm. "Good morning, Diane. I understand Dr. Jensen requested my presence at today's executive committee meeting." "Yes, Dr. Cross. They're gathering in the Azure conference room at 8. Diane handed her a meeting agenda. "Dr. Jensen specifically asked me to give you this." Monique glanced at the document, her heart accelerating when she saw item number 3, Digital Marketing Division Leadership, Candidate Recommendation and Approval, Bradley Cross. So this was it, the moment Bradley would try to secure Tiffany's undeserved promotion. "Thank you, Diane." Monique tucked the agenda into her portfolio. "Is Bradley here yet?" "Arrived about 20 minutes ago. He's in his office with Ms. Brennan, preparing their presentation." Monique nodded and headed down the hallway toward Preston Jensen's office, passing Bradley's along the way. Through the glass wall, she could see Bradley and Tiffany hunched over his computer, their heads close together. Tiffany was dressed impeccably in a tailored blue suit, her platinum blonde hair arranged in a sophisticated updo. She looked every inch the executive, except for the anxious expression that flashed across her face when she glanced up and spotted Monique in the hallway. Bradley followed Tiffany's gaze, his expression shifting from surprise to forced casualness as he stood and opened his office door. "Monique, what brings you up to the executive floor?" His tone was cheerful but strained. "Preston asked me to join the committee meeting this morning," she replied evenly. "Something about input on departmental candidates." Bradley's smile faltered slightly. "Oh? That's unusual. Your expertise is in research, not personnel. Apparently, he values my perspective." Monique glanced past him to where Tiffany was gathering papers, pointedly not making eye contact. "Good morning, Ms. Brennan. Preparing for a presentation." Yes, Dr. Cross." Tiffany finally looked up, her smile tight. "Just some marketing department business." "Well, don't let me interrupt. I'm sure it's important." Monique turned back to Bradley. "I should check in with Preston before the meeting. See you both there." As she walked away, Monique could feel their eyes following her. She maintained her composure until she reached Preston's office, where she rapped lightly on the open door. Jensen looked up from his computer. "Ah, Monique, thank you for coming early." "Of course. Though I admit I'm curious about why you wanted me at an executive committee meeting discussing marketing personnel." Jensen gestured for her to close the door and take a seat. "Because something doesn't add up, and I value your analytical mind." He pushed a folder across his desk. "These are the performance metrics for all the candidates Bradley is considering for the digital marketing director position. Take a look." Monique opened the folder and scanned the contents. Spreadsheets showing quarterly results, client acquisition numbers, campaign effectiveness ratings, and team leadership evaluations. The disparities were stark. Tiffany Brennan's numbers were consistently at the bottom across nearly every category, while two other candidates showed exceptional performance. "Interesting," Monique commented, keeping her voice neutral. "And Bradley is recommending Ms. Brennan." Jensen leaned back in his chair. "He's making quite an emphatic case for her, despite what these numbers show. Says she has intangible leadership qualities and strategic vision that don't show up in the metrics. And you're skeptical." "I've been in business 35 years, Monique. Numbers don't tell the whole story, but they rarely lie this dramatically." He studied her face carefully. "I value Bradley's contributions to Nexus. He's built our marketing department into one of the best in the industry. But his insistence on this particular promotion has been unusual." "In what way?" "Forceful, defensive when questioned. Unlike his normal methodical approach." Jensen tapped his fingers on the desk. "Which is why I wanted you there. You know him better than anyone, and you have no stake in marketing department politics. I'd appreciate your observations during his presentation." Monique closed the folder, her mind racing with implications. Preston was already suspicious of Bradley's recommendation. Her plan might unfold even more effectively than she'd anticipated. "I'll be there," she promised. "And Preston? Thank you for valuing my input." "Always have, Monique. Your work has been the backbone of Nexus's success for years," he smiled wryly, "even if marketing gets all the glory." At precisely 8 o'clock, the executive committee convened in the Azure conference room, a state-of-the-art meeting space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The 12 committee members, including Preston, Jensen, and Bradley, took their places around the massive table. Monique was directed to a seat near Preston, while Tiffany and two other marketing team members, presumably the other candidates for promotion, waited in chairs along the wall, ready to be called upon for their individual presentations. Monique observed Tiffany discreetly. The younger woman appeared composed, but was betraying small signs of nervousness, repeatedly checking her phone, adjusting her jacket, touching her hair. She also seemed to be avoiding looking in Monique's direction entirely, focusing instead on Bradley, who kept shooting her reassuring glances. The meeting began with routine matters: quarterly projections, updates on regulatory approvals, and a brief discussion about the upcoming industry conference. Monique participated when appropriate, but kept her attention primarily on Bradley and Tiffany. Finally, Preston turned to agenda item 3. "Now, let's address the leadership position for our new digital marketing division. Bradley, I understand you have recommendations after reviewing all candidates?" Bradley stood and moved to the presentation screen at the head of the room, exuding confidence. "Thank you, Preston. As you all know, our expansion into digital-first marketing strategies requires leadership with vision and adaptability. I've carefully evaluated all internal candidates based on both quantitative metrics and qualitative leadership potential." He launched into a slick presentation, highlighting the importance of the new division, the challenges it would face, and the qualities needed in its director. Throughout, he subtly emphasized aspects that painted Tiffany in a favorable light, while minimizing the importance of the metrics where she underperformed. "Raw numbers don't capture innovation potential or strategic thinking," he argued smoothly. "Sometimes the candidate with the most conventional success is actually the least prepared to lead us into new territories." Monique watched the committee members' reactions. Most seemed persuaded by Bradley's polished delivery, nodding along with his points. Only Preston and the chief financial officer appeared skeptical, exchanging glances when Bradley made particularly sweeping claims about looking beyond metrics. "With that context established," Bradley continued, "I'd like each candidate to present their vision for the division. We'll start with Tiffany Brennan, followed by Mark Winters and Sophia Chen." As Tiffany rose from her seat and approached the presentation screen, Monique checked her watch. 8:45. By her calculations, if Tiffany had used the jacuzzi as usual before coming to work, something Monique had been counting on given the importance of today's presentation, the secondary phase of the compound should be beginning its activation process. Tiffany began her presentation with practiced poise, clicking through slides that outlined her vision for the digital division. The future of pharmaceutical marketing isn't just moving traditional approaches online, she explained. It's about creating entirely new paradigms of engagement with healthcare providers and patients. She was about 5 minutes into her presentation when Monique noticed the first sign. Tiffany paused mid-sentence, bringing her hand up to brush hair away from her face, and her fingertips lingered against her cheek with a subtle look of confusion. Perfect. It was starting. The blue tint would be developing gradually, starting as a barely perceptible blue undertone to the skin that most would attribute to lighting or imagination. But over the next 20 to 30 minutes, it would intensify to an unmistakable cerulean hue, most noticeable on areas with thinner skin like the face, neck, and hands. And her hair, where the compound had likely been absorbed last night during their jacuzzi session, would begin showing streaks of blue that would become increasingly pronounced. Tiffany continued her presentation, but her delivery became increasingly distracted. She kept touching her face and adjusting her hair, clearly sensing that something was wrong but unable to identify what. Several committee members were now looking at her with slight frowns of confusion. "As you can see from these projection models," Tiffany said, gesturing to a graph, then stopping abruptly as she caught sight of her own hand. She stared at it for a moment, then quickly lowered it and cleared her throat. "As I was saying, these projections indicate potential market penetration of—" "Ms. Brennan," interrupted Cynthia Davis, the chief operating officer, "are you feeling all right? You look a bit off." "I'm fine," Tiffany insisted, though her voice had taken on a panicked edge. "Just a little warm in here." Bradley was now watching with visible concern, shifting uncomfortably in his seat as more committee members began whispering and staring at Tiffany. Preston Jensen leaned forward. "Perhaps we should take a short break?" "No," Tiffany said quickly. I'd prefer to finish my presentation. I've prepared extensively for this opportunity." She forged ahead, but the situation deteriorated rapidly. The blue tint was becoming unmistakable now, her face taking on a distinct azure glow that no amount of makeup could conceal. Streaks of blue were becoming visible in her blonde hair, especially near her temples, and the ends that would have been submerged in the jacuzzi water. The whispers around the table grew louder. Someone stifled a laugh. Bradley was now pale with shock, his eyes darting between Tiffany and the increasingly bewildered committee members. "Is this some kind of marketing stunt?" asked the chief financial officer. "Because, if so, it's in extremely poor taste." "What? No." Tiffany looked genuinely confused. "What are you talking about?" Preston slid his phone across the table to her. "Perhaps you should check your reflection, Ms. Brennan." Tiffany picked up the phone and activated the camera function, switching it to selfie mode. The gasp that escaped her lips was audible throughout the room as she finally saw what everyone else was seeing. Her face had taken on a distinct blue color that was deepening by the minute, and streaks of bright blue were now clearly visible in her blonde hair. "Oh my God!" She dropped the phone as if it had burned her. "What's happening to me?" Bradley shot to his feet. "This meeting needs to adjourn. Tiffany is clearly having some kind of allergic reaction." "An allergic reaction that turns you blue?" The CFO raised an eyebrow. "That's a new one." Tiffany was now frantically examining her hands, which were also turning increasingly blue. "This can't be happening. I have a photo shoot next week." The room erupted into chaos as Tiffany began to panic in earnest. Bradley rushed to her side, attempting to calm her while simultaneously trying to hustle her out of the conference room. But the damage was done. Everyone had witnessed the bizarre transformation, and several committee members were now openly staring at Bradley with suspicion. "Bradley," Preston said firmly, "I think we need an explanation. This is highly unusual." "I have no idea what's happening," Bradley insisted, though his eyes briefly flickered toward Monique with a flash of horrified realization. She must have been exposed to something. Exposed to what, exactly? Monique finally spoke, her voice calm and clinical. "A substance that turns human tissue blue isn't common. In fact, It would likely need to be specially formulated. All eyes turned to her. As a chemist, she continued, I can tell you that such a compound would be complex, designed to activate gradually, perhaps triggered by heat or specific environmental conditions. She tilted her head thoughtfully. The kind of thing someone might encounter in, say, a hot tub or jacuzzi if it had been tampered with. Bradley's face drained of color. What are you implying? I'm not implying anything, Monique replied coolly. I'm simply making a scientific observation. Tiffany, who had been frantically rubbing at her increasingly blue skin, suddenly froze and stared at Bradley. Your jacuzzi? Is that what did this to me? Her voice rose hysterically. You said your wife was at some meeting. You promised it was safe. The conference room fell silent as her words registered with everyone present. Preston Jensen's expression hardened as he looked from Tiffany to Bradley and finally to Monique. It appears, Preston said quietly, that we have multiple issues to address here, none of which are appropriate for a full committee meeting. He stood up. This meeting is adjourned. Bradley, Tiffany, my office. Now. He glanced at Monique. Dr. Cross, I'd appreciate it if you'd join us as well. As the committee members filed out, many casting shocked glances at the increasingly blue Tiffany, Monique gathered her things with deliberate calm. The chain reaction she had set in motion was unfolding perfectly, the physical transformation revealing the moral corruption beneath. Bradley caught her arm as she passed. Did you do this? He hissed, his voice a mixture of fury and disbelief. Monique looked him directly in the eyes. Do what, exactly? Create a situation where the truth becomes visible to everyone? Where actions have consequences? She gently removed his hand from her arm. I think you and Tiffany managed that all on your own. She walked past him toward Preston's office, where a reckoning awaited, not just for the blue-tinged affair now exposed to the entire executive committee, but for the professional ethics violated in the attempted promotion. As she entered Preston's office, Monique felt no triumph or vindication, only a cold certainty that justice, like properly formulated chemistry, was simply a matter of correct proportions and perfect timing. Preston Jensen's office door closed with a decisive click that seemed to finalize the separation between the chaos of the conference room and the controlled confrontation about to unfold. The CEO's expansive corner office, usually a showcase of corporate success with its panoramic city views and tasteful art, now felt like a courtroom awaiting judgment. Sit down, all of you, Preston directed, his normally genial demeanor replaced by cold professionalism. He remained standing, hands clasped behind his back, as he regarded the three people before him. Bradley, rigid with tension, Tiffany, still frantically examining her increasingly blue skin and hair, and Monique, composed and watchful. Would someone care to explain what just happened? Preston's voice was dangerously quiet. Because from where I stand, it appears that my marketing director has been engaging in an inappropriate relationship with a subordinate and attempting to secure her an undeserved promotion, all of which became spectacularly obvious when said subordinate turned blue in front of my entire executive committee. Tiffany burst into tears, blue-tinged teardrops tracking down her azure cheeks. I need a doctor. What's happening to me? Am I poisoned? You're not poisoned, Monique stated matter-of-factly. The compound isn't toxic, just a specialized dye with selective bonding properties. The skin discoloration should fade in roughly 6 to 8 hours with no lasting effects. She paused before adding, the hair, however, is a different matter. Those bonds are considerably more permanent. You, Tiffany pointed a blue finger accusingly at Monique. You did this to me. Bradley turned to his wife, his face a mask of outrage barely concealing fear. How could you? This is assault. It's criminal. Is it? Monique raised an eyebrow. I modified the chemical balance in my own jacuzzi. A jacuzzi that you, Bradley, insisted on installing despite your previous aversion to bacteria factories, as you called them. If unauthorized individuals chose to use my personal property, without my knowledge or consent while I was allegedly at work? She shrugged. That hardly constitutes assault. This is insane, Bradley muttered, running his hands through his hair, which, Monique noted with satisfaction, was also beginning to show faint blue streaks at the temples. The compound had affected him too, just more subtly due to his shorter hair. You can't just— No, Bradley, Preston interrupted sharply. What's insane is bringing your affair into my company, compromising our hiring practices, and attempting to manipulate me into promoting someone based on your personal relationship rather than merit. He turned to Tiffany. Ms. Brennan, you should know that the position you are being considered for requires integrity and sound judgment, qualities conspicuously absent in someone who engages in an affair with their married superior and expects preferential treatment as a result. And Tiffany's sobs intensified, her blue hands covering her face. This will ruin me. I have a modeling side career. I have Instagram partnerships. Perhaps you should have considered the potential consequences before entering Bradley's jacuzzi, Monique suggested, her tone clinical rather than cruel. Actions, like chemical reactions, often produce unexpected results when catalysts are introduced. Preston moved behind his desk and sat down, his expression grave. Bradley, I've respected your work for years, but this, he gestured toward Tiffany, is a violation of our ethics policy, our anti-nepotism guidelines, and my personal trust. He looked at Tiffany. And you, Ms. Brennan, have demonstrated a profound lack of professional ethics. What are you saying? Bradley's voice had taken on a desperate edge. I'm saying that your recommendation for the digital marketing director position is rejected. Furthermore, both of you are suspended pending a full investigation by Human Resources. Preston's tone was final. Ms. Brennan, you should go home, or perhaps seek medical attention if you're concerned about your condition, though, as Dr. Cross indicated, it appears to be temporary. He glanced at her blue-streaked hair. Mostly temporary. Tiffany stood shakily. This isn't fair. I've worked hard for this company. Your performance metrics suggest otherwise, Preston replied coldly. And regardless, your judgment in pursuing a relationship with your direct supervisor demonstrates a fundamental unsuitability for leadership. He gestured toward the door. Please leave my office. As Tiffany fumbled with her belongings, nearly hysterical with distress, Bradley remained seated, his expression oscillating between rage and desperation. You can't seriously believe I'm the first executive to have a personal relationship with a colleague, he argued, once Tiffany had left. This is a witch hunt. No, Bradley, Preston sighed heavily. This is accountability. If you had come to me with a genuine case for Ms. Brennan's promotion based on merit, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But you attempted to manipulate company resources and my trust for personal gain. He shook his head. That I cannot overlook. Bradley's face hardened as he turned to Monique. And what about her? She deliberately sabotaged a company presentation. She tampered with her own property, Preston finished for him. While I don't necessarily approve of Dr. Cross's methods, she didn't bring her personal issues into this office until they directly impacted company business. He gave Monique a measured look, and I suspect she had her reasons. Reasons? Bradley scoffed. She's vindictive, jealous. This was calculated humiliation. Monique, who had remained silent during this exchange, finally spoke. You know what's calculated, Bradley? Encouraging your wife to work late so you can bring your mistress to her home, disabling security cameras to hide your betrayal, using your professional influence to secure advantages for your lover. Her voice remained steady, though her eyes flashed with cold fire. If you're concerned about calculation, perhaps you should examine your own actions. Preston cleared his throat. I believe there are personal matters here that don't require my presence. Bradley, you're suspended until further notice. We'll contact you when HR is ready to proceed with their investigation. He stood up. I suggest you both take some time to sort through your situation. Bradley rose stiffly, his posture rigid with suppressed fury. "This isn't over," he muttered, looking directly at Monique. "Actually," she replied calmly, "I think it is." After Bradley stormed out, Preston regarded Monique thoughtfully. "That was quite a show in the conference room." When she didn't respond, he continued, "I won't ask how you knew about their affair, or how exactly you managed the colorful demonstration. But I will ask, are you all right?" The question, so simple yet laden with genuine concern, nearly cracked Monique's carefully maintained composure. "I will be," she answered after a moment. "Eventually." Preston nodded. "Take some time, Monique. Whatever you need. Your projects can wait." "Thank you, Preston. But work has always been my sanctuary. I'd prefer to stay." "As you wish." He studied her with the perceptiveness that had made him such a successful leader. "Just remember that even the most precisely formulated compounds sometimes need stabilizing agents. Don't try to process this alone." Monique managed a small smile at his chemistry metaphor. "I won't." The remainder of the morning passed in a blur of activity. News of the Blue incident spread through Nexus Pharmaceuticals like wildfire, though few knew the full context. By lunchtime, Monique had received dozens of curious glances and several direct inquiries about Tiffany's bizarre transformation, all of which she deflected with professional vagueness. "Some chemical reactions are simply unpredictable," was all she would say. In her lab, surrounded by the comforting precision of scientific equipment, Monique finally allowed herself to process the morning's events. The public exposure had unfolded even more effectively than she had anticipated. Not only had Bradley and Tiffany's affair been revealed, but the professional misconduct had been laid bare for the entire executive committee to witness. Her phone buzzed with a text from Carmen. "How did it go? You okay?" Monique hesitated before responding. "Better than expected. Bradley and Tiffany both suspended. We'll call you later with details." Another message appeared almost immediately. "That good, huh? Dinner at my place tonight. Allison's been asking for you. No excuses." The thought of her niece's innocent enthusiasm brought the first genuine smile to Monique's face that day. "We'll be there. 6:30? Perfect. And Monique, whatever happened, I'm on your side. Always." That simple affirmation of loyalty, so contrary to the betrayal she'd experienced from Bradley, caused Monique's carefully constructed walls to tremble. She set her phone down and took a deep breath, focusing on the chemical equations displayed on her computer screen until the moment of vulnerability passed. At 3:30, there was a knock on her lab door. She looked up to find Preston Jensen standing there, his expression grave. "Do you have a moment?" he asked. Monique nodded, setting aside her work. "Of course." Preston closed the door behind him and took a seat across from her workstation. "I've just come from a rather unpleasant meeting with our legal department and HR. Bradley is threatening legal action against both the company and you personally." "On what grounds?" Monique asked, unsurprised by her husband's reaction. "He's claiming that you sabotaged a company presentation, created a hostile work environment, and—" Preston hesitated. "Chemically assaulted Ms. Brennan." "Interesting theory," Monique replied calmly. "Does he have evidence that I added anything to my own jacuzzi? Or that I knew Ms. Brennan would be using it without my permission while I was supposedly at work?" "That's precisely what our legal team pointed out." Preston's lips twitched in what might have been suppressed amusement. "Particularly since he would need to explain why Ms. Brennan was in your home jacuzzi to begin with." "A difficult position," Monique agreed. "Indeed. Our attorneys believe his threats are primarily bluster, an attempt to shift focus from his own misconduct. But I wanted to warn you personally." Preston leaned forward. "This may get messier before it resolves, Monique. Are you prepared for that?" "I've been preparing since the moment I discovered their affair," she answered honestly. "I have extensive evidence of Bradley's infidelity, including security footage of them in my home. If he pursues legal action, I'm quite capable of responding in kind." Preston nodded slowly. "I suspected as much. You've always been methodical." He rose to leave, then paused. One more thing. Ms. Brennan has resigned, effective immediately. It seems she's unwilling to face the colorful attention she's receiving. And Bradley? Still suspended, still threatening litigation. But between us, Preston lowered his voice. His position at Nexus is essentially over. The board won't tolerate this kind of ethical breach, especially from someone in his position. He gave her a searching look. I hope that provides some closure. After Preston left, Monique returned to her work with renewed focus. The professional consequences for Bradley and Tiffany had been swift and decisive, but the personal aftermath was still unfolding. Tonight, she would have dinner with Carmen and Allison, finding comfort in the family connections that remained intact despite Bradley's betrayal. Tomorrow, she would begin the process of rebuilding her life, starting with securing a divorce attorney. At 6:15, Monique gathered her things and headed for the parking garage. As she approached her car, she noticed a figure leaning against it. Bradley, his expression thunderous. The blue tint on his skin had faded to a barely perceptible shade, but his hair still showed distinct blue streaks at the temples. "Was it worth it?" he demanded as she approached. "Humiliating me in front of the entire executive committee? Potentially destroying my career?" Monique regarded him coolly. "You seemed unconcerned about humiliating me by bringing your mistress into our home. As for your career, you did that damage yourself, Bradley. I simply made the consequences visible." She moved to open her car door, but he blocked her path. "This isn't over, Monique. You've made a powerful enemy today." "No, Bradley. I've finally recognized that my husband has been my enemy for some time, undermining my trust, violating our home, manipulating circumstances for his convenience." She met his gaze steadily. "Now please, move away from my car. I'm having dinner with Carmen and Allison." "Carmen?" He laughed bitterly. "You think my sister will take your side in this?" "She already has." Monique watched the shock register on his face. "Unlike you, some people value loyalty and honesty." Bradley's composure cracked. "She knows? You told her everything?" "She's family, Bradley. Real family doesn't lie to each other." Monique used his momentary disorientation to move past him and unlock her car. "I suggest you find somewhere else to stay tonight. I've changed the security codes at the house, and your access has been revoked. Your personal items will be available for collection once I've secured legal representation." "You can't just lock me out of my own house," he spluttered. "Actually, I can. The house is in my name, inherited from my parents, if you recall. Something you should have considered before bringing your mistress there." She got into her car and started the engine. "I'll have my attorney contact you regarding divorce proceedings." As she drove away, Monique glanced in her rearview mirror to see Bradley standing motionless in the parking space, his blue-streaked hair visible even at a distance. For the first time since discovering his betrayal, she felt a sense of power returning, not from vengeance, but from reclaiming control over her life and her future. 20 minutes later, she arrived at Carmen's modest suburban home. Before she could even ring the doorbell, Allison flung the door open and launched herself at Monique's legs. "Auntie Monique, Mommy said you're coming for dinner and sleeping over, and we can watch Blue People cartoons again." Monique lifted the child into a tight hug, breathing in the sweet scent of her shampoo. "That sounds perfect, sweetheart." Carmen appeared in the doorway, her expression a mixture of concern and curiosity. "So, how blue did they actually get?" Despite everything, Monique found herself laughing, a genuine, cathartic release that felt like the first real breath she'd taken in days. "Let's just say Tiffany won't be doing any photo shoots anytime soon." "Good," Carmen declared, ushering them inside. "Now come in and tell me everything. I've got wine, lasagna, and absolutely no sympathy for my idiot brother." Later that evening, after Allison had been tucked into bed, Carmen and Monique sat in the kitchen with a second bottle of wine between them. Monique had recounted the day's events in detail, from the gradual blue transformation during Tiffany's presentation to Bradley's confrontation in the parking garage. I still can't believe he had the nerve to threaten you. Carmen shook her head in disgust. After everything he did, he's always believed he could talk his way out of any situation, Monique replied. It's what made him successful in marketing, and, apparently, in deception. Carmen refilled their glasses. So what happens now? Divorce, obviously. I've already contacted a lawyer, Andrea Wilson, who handled my colleague's high-profile separation last year. She's expecting my call tomorrow. And professionally? Will you stay at Nexus? Monique considered this. For now, Preston has been supportive, and my work there is important. She sipped her wine thoughtfully. Though Bradley's inevitably going to spin this as me being a vindictive, jealous wife who couldn't handle his affair. Let him try, Carmen snorted. The man brought his mistress into your home, tried to get her promoted despite her obvious incompetence, and then turned blue in front of the entire executive committee. I don't think his version of events is going to get much traction. Monique smiled faintly. There is a certain poetic justice to it. More than poetic. It's masterful. Carmen raised her glass in a toast. To consequences proportionate to the offense. And to my brilliant sister-in-law, who will always be my sister, regardless of what happens with my brother. As they clinked glasses, Monique felt the first tendrils of healing beginning to take root. The betrayal still hurt. 15 years of marriage couldn't be erased in a day, but she had exposed the truth, reclaimed her power, and preserved the family connections that truly mattered. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Legal proceedings, workplace gossip, the painful process of disentangling her life from Bradley's. But tonight, surrounded by the unconditional support of Carmen and the innocent love of Allison, Monique allowed herself to believe that the future, though different than she had planned, might still hold promise and possibility. You know, Carmen said thoughtfully, Allison asked me the funniest thing earlier. She wanted to know if Uncle Bradley was going to turn blue like the mean people in her cartoon. She laughed softly. Kids have an uncanny sense of justice sometimes. Out of the mouths of babes, Monique agreed, thinking of how Allison's innocent question about the blue cartoon characters had sparked her entire plan. Sometimes the simplest observations lead to the most perfect solutions. Outside, a gentle rain began to fall, washing the world clean as the two women continued their conversation late into the night, planning, supporting, and occasionally laughing at the image of Tiffany and Bradley, literally blue-faced with shock as their deception was exposed for all to see. The morning sun streamed through the windows of Monique's newly redecorated home office, casting a golden glow across the space that had once been Bradley's domain. 6 months had passed since the Blue Incident, as it had come to be known at Nexus Pharmaceuticals. 6 months of transformation, reclamation, and unexpected new beginnings. Monique adjusted her laptop screen and checked her appearance one last time before her virtual meeting. At 42, she had always taken pride in her professional presentation, but there was something different about her now. A quiet confidence that radiated from within, visible in the set of her shoulders and the directness of her gaze. The betrayal that might have diminished another woman had instead revealed Monique's true strength, like a chemical catalyst triggering not a breakdown, but a powerful new reaction. Her phone chimed with a text from Carmen. Good luck today. Allison says her blue scientist auntie is going to rock their socks off. Monique smiled, typing back, Tell my favorite niece I'll do my best sock rocking. Dinner still on for tonight? The reply came instantly. Absolutely. She's already planning our cartoon marathon after. The bond between Monique and her niece had only deepened over the past months. Allison had taken to calling Monique her blue scientist auntie, a nickname stemming from the child's absolute conviction that Monique could turn people blue like magic. While Monique had never confirmed this belief, she hadn't denied it either, allowing Allison to maintain her innocently accurate assessment of her aunt's capabilities. At exactly 9 o'clock, Monique's screen filled with the faces of Preston Jensen, and the Nexus Pharmaceuticals Executive Committee, the same group that had witnessed Tiffany's spectacular blue transformation half a year earlier. "Good morning, everyone," Preston began. "As you know, we're here to discuss the formal appointment of our new Chief Research Officer. Dr. Cross, would you like to present your vision for the department?" Monique shared her screen, displaying a comprehensive strategic plan that had been months in the making. "Thank you, Preston. After evaluating our current research initiatives and market opportunities, I've identified 3 key areas where Nexus can establish definitive leadership in the coming years." She guided them through her presentation with precision and passion, outlining innovative approaches to drug delivery systems, breakthrough treatments for neurological disorders, and cutting-edge applications of molecular stabilization technology. The committee members listened with rapt attention, occasionally interjecting with thoughtful questions that Monique addressed with the confident expertise that had earned her this promotion. "In conclusion," she said, "by realigning our research priorities and fostering deeper collaboration between departments, Nexus has the opportunity not just to develop new medications, but to fundamentally transform patient outcomes across multiple therapeutic areas." When she finished, there was a moment of silence before Preston spoke. "I think I speak for the entire committee when I say that your vision is exactly what Nexus needs at this juncture." He smiled warmly. "Congratulations, Chief Research Officer Cross. The position is formally yours, effective immediately." The screen filled with congratulatory messages in the chat and nodding approval from the committee members. Monique allowed herself a moment to savor the achievement, not merely a professional advancement, but a testament to her resilience and value beyond the shadow of her failed marriage. After the meeting concluded, Preston remained on the call. "That was exemplary, Monique. You've earned this many times over." "Thank you, Preston. I'm excited about the possibilities." He hesitated before adding, "I thought you might want to know. Bradley has accepted a position with Henderson Pharmaceuticals on the West Coast." Monique absorbed this information with a composed nod. "I wish him well." And surprisingly, she meant it. The anger and hurt that had once consumed her thoughts of Bradley had gradually faded into something resembling indifference, the emotional equivalent of a neutralized reaction. "Also," Preston continued with a hint of amusement, "I ran into Tiffany at an industry conference last month. She's working for a small marketing firm now. Her hair—" He paused, clearly searching for diplomatic wording. "Still blue at the ends?" Monique suggested. "Actually, she's embraced it, dyed the rest to match, and calls it her signature look. Claimed it was a deliberate career strategy all along." Monique couldn't help but laugh. "Adaptability is a survival skill. I can respect that, even if I don't respect her choices." After ending the call, Monique walked through her home, the home that was now truly and solely hers. In the weeks following the revelation of Bradley's affair, she had methodically reclaimed every space, removing his presence room by room. The heavy masculine furniture in the living room had been replaced with pieces that reflected her own taste. The master bedroom had been completely redecorated, from the paint on the walls to the bedding, erasing all reminders of the betrayal that had occurred there. But the most significant transformation had been in the backyard. Monique stepped onto her patio and gazed at what had once been Bradley's pride, the luxury jacuzzi that had played such a crucial role in exposing his infidelity. It was gone now, replaced by a beautiful stone fountain surrounded by meticulously planned garden beds filled with rare medicinal plants from around the world. The sound of flowing water created a peaceful atmosphere that had become Monique's favorite place to think and reflect. She had considered keeping the jacuzzi as a sort of trophy, a reminder of her triumph. But ultimately, she had recognized that true healing meant creating something new and meaningful rather than preserving monuments to past pain. The doorbell rang, pulling her from her thoughts. Opening the door, she found a delivery person holding a massive arrangement of flowers. "Dr. Monique Cross?" he asked. "Yes, that's me. Special delivery." Congratulations, apparently. He handed her the elaborate bouquet and departed with a friendly nod. Monique brought the flowers to her kitchen island and opened the small card nestled among the blooms. To our brilliant new Chief Research Officer, may your leadership bring as much color to Nexus as you've brought to our lives. With admiration and affection, your research team. She smiled, touching the card gently. What her colleagues didn't know, what only Carmen and perhaps Preston suspected, was that the blue incident had catalyzed changes far beyond the dissolution of her marriage and professional advancement. The specialized compound Monique had created for her, Jacuzzi, had unexpectedly led to a breakthrough in her research. In studying its binding properties with hair proteins, she had discovered a novel mechanism for targeted medication delivery, a finding that was now at the core of Nexus's most promising new patent application. From personal crisis had emerged professional innovation, a perfect example of the scientific principle that even failed experiments often yielded valuable data. Monique's phone rang. Her divorce attorney, Andrea Wilson. "Good news, Monique," Andrea said without preamble. "The judge has signed off on the final property settlement. As expected, the house remains solely in your name, along with your retirement accounts and investments. Bradley keeps his personal assets and the agreed-upon cash settlement. It's officially done. Thank you, Andrea, for everything. You made it easy. Unlike most of my clients, you came prepared with impeccable documentation and reasonable expectations." There was a smile in the attorney's voice. "How does it feel to be officially divorced?" Monique considered the question. "Like the successful completion of a necessary process," she answered honestly. "Neither celebration nor mourning seems appropriate. Just acknowledgement that this chapter is closed." After ending the call, Monique checked the time. She had a lunch meeting in 30 minutes with Dr. Nathan Reynolds, the brilliant neurologist who had joined Nexus 3 months ago to head their expanding neuroscience division. Their working lunches had become increasingly frequent and increasingly less about work as the weeks progressed. At 45, Nathan was divorced himself and had approached their growing connection with respectful patience, understanding that Monique was still processing the end of her marriage. There had been no declarations, no pressure, just stimulating conversation and the gradual discovery of shared values and complementary perspectives. Last week, he had finally asked her to dinner. "Not as colleagues, Monique, as something else, if you're open to that possibility." She had surprised herself by saying yes. Tonight would be their first official date, followed by family dinner with Carmen and Allison on Sunday. A new pattern was emerging in her life, one built on authenticity and mutual respect, rather than deception and convenience. Monique's phone chimed with another message, this one from Preston Jensen. "Just got off the phone with the patent attorneys. Your targeted delivery system preliminary application has been approved for expedited review. They're calling it potentially groundbreaking. Knew you'd want to hear immediately." The news sent a surge of professional satisfaction through her. The patent, if granted, would not only advance Monique's research significantly, but would likely become one of Nexus's most valuable intellectual properties, all stemming from a compound originally created for a very different purpose. As she prepared to leave for her lunch meeting, Monique caught sight of herself in the hallway mirror. The woman who looked back at her bore little resemblance to the betrayed wife, who had hidden a camera in a planter 6 months ago. This woman stood taller, her eyes clearer, her purpose more defined. The painful catalyst of Bradley's betrayal had initiated a transformation more complete than any chemical reaction she could have designed in her laboratory. At the restaurant, Nathan was already waiting at a corner table, his face lighting up when he spotted her. "There she is, Nexus's new Chief Research Officer," he said warmly as she sat down. "Congratulations, Monique. No one deserves it more." "Thank you." She smiled, appreciating his genuine enthusiasm for her success. "It's been quite a morning. The divorce is finally official, too. How are you feeling about that?" His question held no judgment or expectation, just sincere interest in her emotional state. "Ready?" she replied simply. "Ready to move forward without that weight." Nathan nodded, understanding. "To new beginnings, then." He raised his water glass in a toast. "To new beginnings," she agreed, touching her glass to his. Their conversation flowed easily, as they discussed everything from the latest journal articles to their favorite hiking trails. When Nathan mentioned a documentary series on breakthrough scientific discoveries, Monique found herself laughing. "What's so funny?" he asked. "My niece Allison has been trying to convince me to watch her cartoon about blue scientists instead. According to her, they have super cool powers that normal scientists don't have." Nathan's eyes twinkled with amusement. "Like turning things blue?" Monique froze momentarily. "What do you mean?" "Come on, Monique." He lowered his voice conspiratorially. "The famous blue incident is practically laboratory legend at Nexus. No one can prove anything, of course, but those of us with chemistry backgrounds can make educated guesses." Instead of the alarm she might once have felt, Monique experienced a surprising relief at being seen so clearly, and accepted nonetheless. "Hypothetically speaking," she said carefully, "if someone were to create such a compound, it would be a fascinating demonstration of targeted biochemical interaction. Hypothetically speaking," Nathan continued, playing along, "it might also be the most elegantly executed response to betrayal in pharmaceutical history." Their eyes met in shared understanding, and Monique felt something shift between them. A deepening connection based on seeing and acknowledging each other's true nature without judgment or pretense. That evening, after a dinner that extended hours beyond their original reservation, as they found themselves reluctant to end their conversation, Nathan walked Monique to her car. "I've been wanting to ask," he said, as they paused beside her vehicle. "Would you be open to joining me for the symphony next weekend? They're performing Vivaldi's Four Seasons." "I'd like that very much," Monique replied, feeling a flutter of anticipation that had nothing to do with chemicals or compounds, just the natural chemistry between two people discovering a meaningful connection. His smile was warm as he leaned in and kissed her cheek gently. "I'm looking forward to it." As she drove home, Monique realized she was humming, a small but significant indicator of her changing emotional state. The betrayal that had once seemed world-shattering had become merely a turning point, a moment that had revealed not just Bradley's true character, but her own strength and capacity for renewal. Arriving home, she kicked off her shoes and wandered out to her garden fountain. The evening air was cool and fragrant with the scent of the medicinal herbs she had planted. Sitting on the stone bench beside the flowing water, Monique reflected on the journey of the past 6 months. She had lost a husband, but reclaimed her home and her sense of self. She had advanced professionally, turning personal pain into scientific innovation. She had deepened her bond with Carmen and Allison, discovering that family connections could transcend marital status. And now, she was cautiously opening herself to new possibilities with Nathan. A relationship built on mutual respect and genuine admiration, rather than convenience or obligation. The sound of her phone interrupted her thoughts. It was Carmen, sending a photo of Allison proudly holding up a drawing she had made. A stick figure with red hair wearing a lab coat, surrounded by blue test tubes and smiling faces. Allison's school assignment was to draw her hero. The message read. The teacher was a bit confused about the blue test tubes, but Allison explained that her Auntie Monique helps people by making special blue medicine. Thought you'd want to see. Tears sprang unexpectedly to Monique's eyes, not of sadness, but of profound gratitude for this small person who saw her not as a betrayed wife or even as a successful scientist, but simply as someone worthy of admiration and love. She typed back, "Tell her it's the most beautiful drawing I've ever seen, and that her blue scientist auntie loves her very much." As twilight deepened into evening, Monique remained in her garden, listening to the soothing sound of water flowing over stone. The jacuzzi that had once represented betrayal was gone, transformed into something far more meaningful, much like Monique herself. 6 months ago, she had used her scientific knowledge to expose a painful truth through an unmistakable blue transformation. But the most significant transformation had been her own, not visible on her skin or in her hair, but evident in every aspect of her reclaimed life. From the fountain came the gentle, continuous sound of water, finding its natural course, adapting to obstacles, flowing around barriers, always moving forward. It was the perfect metaphor for resilience, for the human capacity to navigate pain and emerge not diminished, but renewed. Monique took a deep breath of the night air, feeling a profound sense of peace settle over her. The chemical equation of her life had been irrevocably altered, not by Bradley's betrayal, but by her own response to it. She had refused to be a victim, instead becoming the catalyst for her own transformation. As she looked up at the stars appearing one by one in the darkening sky, Monique Cross, daughter, sister, aunt, scientist, and now chief research officer, smiled at the beautiful simplicity of it all. The unexpected blue reaction that had exposed deception had led to something far more valuable: the authentic life she was now creating, on her own terms, surrounded by people who truly valued her. And unlike the temporary blue stain that had faded from Tiffany's skin, this transformation would endure, a permanent change in the chemistry of Monique's world, leading to reactions and possibilities she was only beginning to discover. Some might have called it karma, but Monique knew better. It wasn't mystical justice that had reshaped her life. It was the perfectly calibrated reaction of a woman who understood that sometimes the most powerful catalyst for change was simply the courage to create it herself. To new beginnings, she whispered to the night, echoing their earlier toast. And this time, the words felt not like hope, but like certainty, the inevitable conclusion of a formula perfectly designed and flawlessly executed. In science, as in life, Monique had learned, the most beautiful transformations often began with an unexpected catalyst and a single, brave decision to change the equation. If you enjoyed the story, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And drop a comment below. What city are you watching from? And if your heart tells you to, feel free to leave me a tip on Buy Me a Coffee. Just check the first pinned comment. Thanks for keeping me company and for the coffee, and I'll see you in the next story.